Hi everyone, welcome back to Extra Credit, and this is our 17th and final episode on ancient Greece. So last time we saw how with the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC, the Greeks pulled off one last miraculous underdog victory, sending the Persians home with their collective tail firmly between their legs. And just for a little bit of icing on that cake, on the very same day as Plataea, the Greek navy also scored a lesser-known victory at the Battle of Mycale, finishing off Xerxes' fleet of warships once and for all. All of which meant that after 10 long years of fear, fretting, and fighting for their very survival, the Greeks could finally get back to doing what they loved most: fighting each other. So with these last victories bringing an end to the Persian Wars once and for all, what exactly did the Greeks go and do with their time for the next century or so, other than, like inventing Western civilization? Well, the first thing to remember is that just because we know the Persian Wars were finished now, doesn't mean that the Greeks did. For all they knew, Xerxes was probably back home in Persia plotting his nefarious revenge, this time using sharks with laser beams. But in reality, Xerxes was actually squashing a rebellion in Babylon at the moment, and after all he had suffered at the hands of the Greeks, he had no plans on going back for more. Plus, after a road trip like that, he had like 4 seasons of The Office to catch up on. But the Greeks didn't know that, and so with the dust still settling on the battlefield at Plataea, and the allies still pinching themselves to make sure their victory hadn't been a dream, priority number 1 was suiting up for the next invasion, whenever it might come. To that end, a brand new group was formed known as the Justice League, whose purpose was to... Oh, sorry, wrong league. No, this one was actually called the Delian League, named after the sacred island of Delos, which was kind of like their secret headquarters, minus the Batcave. The Delian League was an alliance of over 300 Greek city-states whose purpose was to band together to fight the Persians if they ever showed up again. But as friendly as all of this might sound, the reality was a little less peachy. See, in the aftermath of the struggle with Persia, it was the people of Athens and Sparta who suddenly found themselves thrust into the spotlight as the undisputed heroes of the hour. And as Ron Weasley could have warned them, it kinda went to their heads. To make a long story short, the Athenians ended up taking over the Delian League and transforming it into something that looked a whole lot less like a league and a lot more like an empire. An Athenian Empire, to be precise. With the sudden rush of new wealth and power, the city of Athens embarked on a whole new chapter of its history, which is still to this day considered one of the most glorious golden ages of all time. This was the start of the famous classical period, when the Athenians shot to the very top of Greek civilization, with achievements in art, literature, philosophy, and politics, laying the groundwork for so much that we take for granted today. It was now that the Athenian Assembly finally voted to rebuild the temples that had been destroyed by the Persians in their invasion, culminating in one of the crown jewels of ancient architecture, the Parthenon. Without a doubt, the greatest Athenian of this golden age was the general Pericles, who stood at the head of Athens for 40 years, with a combination of smooth talking and a really big brain. No, actually, he had a ginormous forehead. You can look it up. But with a head like that, Pericles was smart enough to know that all the glories of his own day and age had been purchased entirely by the generation that came before. As Pericles himself acknowledged in one of his most famous speeches, "When our fathers faced the Persians, their resources could not compare to ours. But by wise counsels and daring deeds, they drove out the invaders and made our city what it is now." In the end, the Greeks of the Golden Age came to believe that their ancestors' incredible victories at the battles of Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea had all been part of the gods' divine plan to teach their enemies a lesson about the dangers of pride and greed. And if so, it's a lesson that Xerxes and his descendants seem to have taken to heart, because after the Battle of Plataea, neither Xerxes nor any other Persian king ever dared to march their men into Greece again. But even if the Persians had learned their lesson, the Greeks, not so much. Because, as you can imagine, not everybody was exactly tickled pink by the Athenians and their fancy new empire. In the true spirit of Greek frenemies, it came as a surprise to exactly nobody when the Athenians' old pals, the Spartans, started their own secret club called the Peloponnesian League. With both sides gathering followers, it didn't exactly take a philosopher to figure out that the little sandbox of Greece wasn't going to be big enough for the both of them. And when things finally did blow up in 431 BC, the resulting smackdown would take the form of a horrific 30-year bloodbath known to historians as the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War was pretty much the World War I of ancient Greece, a back-and-forth wrestling match that cost a whole ton of blood and treasure without actually accomplishing anything, what was the word again? Oh yeah, anything. By 404 BC, almost a century after their first brush with the Persians, the city-states of Greece were as divided and drained as they'd ever been, and as the 300s went by, things only got worse. Finally, in 338 BC, the bickering Greeks were steamrolled by a Macedonian warlord named Philip and his teenage boy Alexander, also known as ATG to his bros. Despite being from Macedonia to the north of Greece, Alexander considered himself a Greek at heart, and even though the Persian Wars were by now 150 long years ago, he still hadn't forgiven the so-called barbarians for messing with his precious Greece. And if you're thinking, hey, didn't this Alex guy just conquer Greece himself? I mean, isn't that a little hypocritical? Just think of it like the whole no one gets to beat up my little brother except me sort of a thing. So with his Greek subjects behind him, Alexander launched what is arguably the most effective military campaign of all time, devouring the entire Persian Empire and then some in 13 short years. As a side project, he also ended up spreading the Greek culture and language across the known world, essentially creating the world as we know it today. To choose just one out of literally hundreds of possible examples, the whole reason the Bible's New Testament is written in Greek is thanks to Alexander. As for the man himself, he died tragically at the tender age of 32 and was laid to rest in a solid gold coffin with an inscription that read, "I conquered literally everything and all I got was this lousy Oliver Stone film." But to make yet another long story much too short, with Alexander dead, the glory that was Greece finally began to fade, setting the stage for the torch to be passed to the Romans. And that, as they say, is another story, which you can also find on this channel. In the end, the incredible story of the Persian Wars that we've experienced together over these past 17 episodes is just that, an incredible story. And like all good stories, it still holds a powerful spell over our imaginations today. Case in point, in 1821, when the modern nation of Greece was once again fighting for its independence, this time against the Ottoman Empire, an English poet named Lord Byron actually signed up to fight on the Greek side, putting himself in the line of fire for a land and people whose history meant the world to him. And if there was any doubt as to what made him go to such great lengths for a country that wasn't even his own, his poetry made it crystal clear. The mountains look on Marathon, and Marathon looks on the sea. And musing there an hour alone, I dreamed that Greece might still be free. 2,300 years after the Battle of Marathon, Lord Byron gave his life fighting to make that dream a reality once again. But in our own day and age, the memory of Greece's struggle against Persia and the magnificent human drama that surrounded it is finally starting to fade. The iconic moments that past generations grew up on are pretty much unknown now to the average North American young person. From the Athenians' legendary heroism at Marathon, to the Spartans' sacrifice at Thermopylae, to Xerxes watching with pride as his men marched across the sea, only to watch in horror as they were swallowed by it at Salamis. These are the classic stories that are quietly being forgotten by a modern world that doesn't even know its own history. And so, it's fitting to end this story right back where we started it, with our good old friend and guide Herodotus, whose whole reason for telling this story in the first place was that the glory of those exploits, which served to display Greeks and barbarians alike to such effect, be kept alive. So like and subscribe already. Hey everyone, thank you so much one last time here for watching this series on ancient Greece. I really hope you guys all got something out of it and enjoyed watching it even half as much as I enjoyed making it. This was a 10-month project for me and it was a ton of work, but also a ton of fun, and I really hope you all learned something cool from it. Your very last pop quiz is to name the English poet who died during the Greek War of Independence in 1824. I want to give a special shout out to my students here for putting up with me and watching my videos. A big thanks to all my faithful viewers from Otterburn to Ohio and everywhere in between. You know who you are, and you rock. An extra big thanks to Herodotus for writing an amazing book that more people really should know and read. And last of all, to my wife and kids, thanks so much for putting up with me wandering around the house muttering script ideas under my breath for these past 10 months. I promise all the millions of dollars of ad revenue I'm gonna make on this thing is gonna be totally worth it. I'm gonna go off and dream up something different for our next series now, so in the meantime, you know what to do. Work hard, read books, play outside, and we'll see you next time.